And welcome everyone to an exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. I'm your host, Michael. And tonight I am joined with an amazing guest who I am so excited to have on the show. We've both been eagerly awaiting the arrival of the episode and can thankfully say it has arrived. And with that, I am going to allow my guest to introduce himself because he has such an amazing background that I just don't feel I could do it justice. So I'm going to turn it over to the one, the only, the amazing, wise, mystical Cal Melkez.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a pleasure. Been waiting for the show for months now, but hey, we're here. It has begun, and I'm excited to see what we get into. Just to give a good primer for people who don't know who I am a astral projection teacher, a spiritual life coach. I make videos on YouTube and TikTok, and I have a combined following of a couple 100,000 people on there, and we have a lot of fun just diving deep into the spiritual mysteries that are kind of around us. And what I'm really big on right now is helping people awaken their inner God, or another way to put it would be their psychic abilities, to awaken their inner energy and to start looking beyond the veil. I've been teaching people how to do that sort of stuff for over a decade now. Time flies, especially when you're having fun. And it's a great time. I've experienced a lot of strange things, from astral projection to remote viewing to seeing, hearing spirits, tapping into that whole thing. And it's just been a blast. So I'd love to get into it.
Very cool. And I have to say, I'm curious because being an astral projection myself, is it something that you learned to tap into, or was it a natural thing that you just did it? And so you were like, I don't know how to explain this, how to do it. I just do.
No, it was rather difficult for me. I know there are people out there who have a natural propensity to these sort of things. They have a natural inclination, but I was not one of those people. I, however, felt that there was something off about the world for a long time. You know how in the Matrix, Morpheus is like, perhaps you felt there was something off about the world. But that's kind of how I felt when I was a kid. I was like, I've done this before. This whole like birthday thing and this like everyday going to, all of this. I was very familiar with it. And that kind of led me over the years to, looking into the mind and consciousness and hypnosis. And that's kind of where it began for me. I started with self hypnosis specifically. I gave a lot of time to that because for whatever reason, I always had this inner knowing that if I wanted to get at the power within me, I had to start in the mind. I had to get at my subconscious and marry the two, the conscious and the unconscious. And that progressed into meditation, Buddhism, lucid dreaming, or dream yoga. And then eventually, after years and years of struggling and trying to do it, searching on forums, watching videos, talking to people left and right, I finally had my first astral projection experience. And it was life changing. Like I can say, without a doubt, I wouldn't be the person I am today if that wasn't a factor in my life. I'd be totally different. It's allowed me to experience life so much more fully, and also to know, yeah, like there's something past this, there's something more than this, and I can get at it, I can reach it. So it was a really big deal for me. That first experience was something strange. I believe I started from a technique that I teach my students now to help them have their experiences, and I did that technique. I went to sleep, and I was woken up in the middle of the night. And I woke up abruptly, and I was looking up at the ceiling. It was just, well, it's kind of weird. I don't know why I'm awake. I kind of woke up from a nightmare too, so I was feeling kind of austery, kind of weird and spacey. And then the next thing you know, I go up to roll over so I can get out of bed and get a drink of water. And as I get ready to move, I feel I'm paralyzed completely. I couldn't move anything, and this it had happened before, like sleep paralysis, but never this sudden. Like, I was awake. Everything was fine. I was getting up. I was ready to do something, and then bang, all of a sudden I can't move. Usually when I have sleep paralysis, I kind of wake up into it, or it's something like that.
Right.
It was like, oh, I'm awake. Okay, let me get up, and I'm stuck. And then the next thing I know, of course I'm afraid because I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I can't move. And then I start feeling these waves of energy, these waves of like these currents of electricity start moving through me. And it's incredibly intense. I'd never felt anything like it up until that point, never so strong. And it was like my whole body was buzzing, and like I was laying on the beach right up against the shore, and just the water was just lapping up over me. These crazy waves. And it got so intense that I really felt like I was going to die in that moment. There's this buzzing, this crazy energy, this like electricity flowing through me. And I was just like, if this keeps up, if this continues, I'm going to die. Like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I broke something. Maybe I did it this time with the techniques that I do. Like, this is it. I better pack my bags. And then all of a sudden, when I reach the peak of how much I can take, it's like a pop. And I feel myself as if something grabbed my shoulders and pulled me out of bed. I felt myself get pulled out of my own skin. It was like being in a wetsuit and feeling it just like come off of you. And it's like an electric sort of tingle going down my body. And the next thing I know, I'm on the ground. And I'm like, oh, that's confusing. Well, what the hell that was about? I look around, and my room is it looks kind of strange, kind of tinted, a little bit tinted blue. There's like this strange bluish around it. And I look around the room and I was like, what the hell is going on? What happened? And I look back down at the bed where I was, and there I am, like still on the bed, looking as though I'm in pain. I was like kind of scrunched up, and I got in real close to my face, and I was like, holy shit, I did it. It's finally happened. And, I ran all through the house floating around and had a really good time for maybe like a minute or two. And then it eventually shifted into something else. When that experience was over, I was shaking. I was like convulsing. I called my mentor, and I called him up on the phone, and of course he didn't answer. So I left him a message. I was like, I did it. It finally happened. It's crazy. And he wakes up the next day and he's like, I knew something was going on with you. And then I checked my phone, and you left me like 5 messages. But it was an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, looking back at it now, in the position you're in now and understanding, do you think the waves of the electricity was like the energy severing your connection between the body so that you would be free to move on? And also, if it was you pulling yourself out of the skin so that you would be more comfortable to go, yes, I have left my body. I'm in the astral.
That's interesting. You're probably the only person ever to have, for your second question, to have made that sort of connection. That's actually something. It's actually really freaky that you that you said that. No one else has ever said that ever. You can actually look at all the other interviews I've been on. That's something I actually teach people now, and I found it in ancient Egyptian culture, the Book of the Dead, and their ideas about the spirit that guides you after you die. They believe there's a separate spirit that guides you and directs you, and that spirit, I believe, is what pulled me out of my body that day. They say that spirit is with you from birth. And throughout my projections, as I got better and better at it, I started to encounter this being that basically was me. It looked like me. It was like made of light, and it would guide me through these experiences. I think what I experienced there was that. It pulled me out of my body and, helped me have that experience. As far as the energy severing, that's very interesting. What I attribute that as is a shift in your vibratory resonance, if you want to make it sound really cool and scientific and stuff. But what I think is, I like to think of it as a radio. It's what I usually tell people is think about consciousness, this experience of reality, as a radio. And on that radio, you have your home station or your dial 1, the home station. That's this 3D reality. That's this experience we're having now. When you're astral projecting or you're in the transition to a projection, what happens is you start to turn the dial and you get this interference as you move to the next station. And I think that energy that you're picking up on is that interference as you're moving over and your consciousness is allowed to then go out and have these experiences. And there's something very interesting about that energy. It's pervasive throughout just about every culture I've looked at, every spiritual tradition. They're all familiar with this energy, this tingling, this buzzing that everybody feels, the goosebumps, some people call it. I heard somebody call it goose skin or something like that, or duck skin or something. It was funny how they said it. But everybody knows about this. Every culture has this, and they have some way of using it, some way of cultivating it, bringing it up, and growing with it. In Christianity, you would call that the Holy Spirit. And, in Buddhism and Hinduism, you'd call that the Kundalini Shakti, and so on and so on. And I found that, especially scientifically, this sort of thing is indicative of a higher order brain function. There's something happening in the subconscious that we don't have access to, which I find really interesting, because when you start to develop your psychic abilities and activate your energy and all these other things, you notice that you can bring up these chills and this waves of energy at will. And scientifically, you're not supposed to be able to do that because it's in the same league as the parasympathetic nervous system, heartbeat, digestion, pupil dilation, all of these things that you can't really control so much. You shouldn't be able to control this either. And so I find that very interesting.
And one thing I was also thinking about, and I'm curious your opinion, is when, in astral traveling, you're severing your body from your spirit sense is a way of looking at it. And so you're two different places at the same time. Well, if your mind has the objective of this is not something I can do as long as I'm alive, I'm wondering if, like you were saying, how you felt so close to death, if you had that mentality. And so your mind said, okay, we're going to symbolically show you going to that finality point so that you will accept now you're being separated. Because your body, your mind goes, oh man, we experienced death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, oh look, I'm not dead. I'm looking at my body. I'm in the astral. And so it was like your subconscious allowing your conscious mind to understand what was happening and processing it. I forget what the term for that is, where the mind takes over and creates an imagery so that you can process and accept it in a much easier way than just going from A to B and being like, oh my God.
Maybe like a defense mechanism or a patterning of some kind. Yeah, that's an interesting take. Definitely. I do feel like there is part of that in there where I guess I should say the first time you astral project, it is very different. It is very peculiar, and it can be very frightening, because if it happens to you spontaneously and you don't know what's going on, you didn't try to make it happen, and next thing you know, you're floating around the room, it could be rather frightening, definitely. And so I can see how, yeah, that would be a good way to look at it. The subconscious mind kind of aids you in this visualization, this creation of this pattern, so that you can move through that.
And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of curious, it's funny you say, spontaneously being scared. So I will admit I spontaneously can do it. I've been able to do it since a kid. Don't hold it against me. I don't know why, but it's been a gift of mine. And my first experience, I was like, I left my room. I traveled around to different places on the planet. And then I was like, you know what? If I can travel here, can I travel further up? And actually left the atmosphere. And I was like, this is so fun and so cool. And then probably you had this experience is you forget how to land gently and slammed into the body and woke up and was like, oh my God, my muscles hurt. My body hurts. What happened?
Yeah. And that's, I usually look for things like that. People are like, oh, I astral project all the time. And people either describe the sensation of being on a rocket ship and just blasting out of their body. And other people describe like the slamming down back into their body. And then for me, there's usually a period of like, the feeling where you haven't eaten. And so like you're low blood sugar and you're kind of just like, kind of shaky a little bit. That
Right.
usually lasts a few minutes for me. This, this kind of like shaking, convulsing, low blood sugar energy feeling. Oh yeah, that's when you start going and start experiencing these different places, you start to realize how interesting and how real it is. I remember when I first started projecting, I would go and I would just like look in on my family members. I would just like go from room to room and watch people sleep. Like, oh, interesting. Like I'm actually like I'm actually here doing this. And there was one experience where I went and it's funny thinking back to it, as I had a friend and one of my mentors actually, who at the time and still he's very very psychic. He can see things very clearly. I projected and I went and I saw what he was doing and just checked him out. He was just like on the phone talking to someone, and then next thing you know, he stops and he's just like eyes get wide and I'm standing there, I was like, what's going on? And he stops and he does stops talking on the phone and he's just looking. And I snap back and I'm in my body. Next moment, he calls me the next day on the phone and he's like, what did you do? What are you doing? And I was like, oh, I finally astral projected again. It took a while, but I did it. And I looked in on you. And he's just like, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that anymore. Not like that. You scared the hell out of me. So it's really interesting how you can interact with people. And I found that people who are exceptionally psychic, who are open to that, they can actually see you and interact with you, which makes me think of like a crossover between like ghosts and spirits and these sort of things and how that works. There's really cool stuff.
It is. And I have to say is yeah, I did like you and I hover over people's houses that are friends or family. I don't go into the house because I figure, yeah, that's gonna freak them out. So it's like I will stay outside and the interesting thing is, I don't know if you recall this, but when the astral, like when you're looking at a house, it's not a solid house. It's like just energy waves. And
Mm,
so it's like you can see what's going on inside without having to say like quote x-ray vision or anything because it's like the walls don't exist, the roof doesn't exist, but they're all in their rooms and you can tell they're in rooms, but you can see through everything and you can see like okay, yeah, so and so's asleep, okay, so the dogs are okay over there or the pets are good.
mm,
And the pets every once in a while I think see what's going on and they're kind of confused themselves, and so I'll be like, okay, we're good here, and move on to somewhere else. And so I don't know if you had that experience too, as you were saying,
mm.
going and visiting people, if you notice like houses don't physically appear as we see them.
I found that in general, the world doesn't come through as it normally does all the time. And the first time I experienced that was like going back to that mentor, that friend that was on the phone. I thought about him and I was there. Well, I didn't have to like traverse like a place. I just thought about like seeing where he was at, and I was there seeing it. And so it's like there's no distance. There's just as fast as you can think about something, you're there. From what I've noticed. And the first time I experienced the like X-ray vision or the seeing through sort of things in this like call it like total vision or like complete vision where you're seeing everything. I actually, I projected and I was in my house and, I found it strange because I was seeing outside the house to the other house. I was like, what's going on there? It started to confuse me. And then I started to see the ground kind of like moving, like I was walking, but I wasn't. Like it was a conveyor belt. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I started to see like objects moving in the kitchen I was looking in. And it started to freak me out so much because like I don't know what's going on here. And I turned around, and when I turned, I saw this like tapestry, this like almost like this backdrop behind me, but it was taking up my visual field when I turned around. Like everything I could see from left to right was like this image. And it looked like a kaleidoscope. How kaleidoscopes have like shards, of like shards of images. It looked like a kaleidoscope in front of me. And in each shard, I could see a moment from my life, from birth all the way to death. I saw like just tons of moments, different ages. There were tons of them. And I could see myself and what I was going to do from the next moment, and conversations I had had the day before. And I looked at myself and I was old. And at the end of it, it wasn't me anymore. There was just like, it looked like space in the last images. And so I thought that was really interesting. And looking at that for a moment, I started to, it almost felt like I was being absorbed by it, like sucked into it, like a vacuum or something. Like I was about to move into that. And the perception of it was starting to compound. Like in each shard was more shards. And I was just like, oh, no, I can't do this. We got to get out of this. I snapped back and I'm in my body. I was like, oh, that was a wild one. I wrote it down and everything. But it gets real weird. Like perception starts to shift. And one of the interesting things I've been asked before is, do you think it's actually happening? Do you think you're actually interacting with these things and seeing these things? And I always revert back to what Joe Rogan said pertaining to DMT. He was like, does it really matter if you're having the experience or just imagining the experience? Either way, if it's real or if it's not, you're still having that experience, and it's still absolutely engrossing and like you're there. It's visceral. You're in it. And it makes me think all of our human experience is a hallucination. Like we're not ever seeing or interacting with anything. It's being processed by the brain. So in a way, everything that we experience is fake. It's an illusion. It's not actually there. Astral projection is a sort of experience just like this, that even if it's not absolutely one-to-one the way you think it should be, you're still having that experience. So in some way, it's still real.
Yeah. And what's kind of interesting is like you were talking about the Matrix earlier. As I was listening to you explain how you view it and how I view it, and I started to think about when Morpheus was sitting on the chair and you got the thunder and lightning, and the lightning around, and the place looks so strange. And he's like, where am I? He goes, this is the real world. And it's like, and then they go into these different places where they can get all the gear and, experience everything. But I was like, maybe that's the astral for us is the real world free of the matrix we're living in. And like you're saying, with the abilities where you saw the shards, that was like the architect's room, if you remember in the movie.
Oh, yeah, the screen. Oh, yeah, very good. I never thought about it like that. Oh, yeah.
And also is, the fact that when you start to realize, what's illusion, what's real, you start to realize, like you're saying, things around here don't often seem real, or like you're not seeing it in the normal sense that you used to. And so it's like, I wonder if it's kind of like if the Matrix is, once you get in the astral and you accept the astral what it is, it opens your mind to what really is happening down here.
It gives you a different perspective, I think, definitely. And I do see, and I think other people's, like even you could attest to this. That people who astral project and who have that ability, have that experience, they have this continual state of almost derealization. This like dissociation from this real world. It feels like a dream being here in this world. And for me, it's because it pales in comparison to how clear and how vibrant it is when you're out of body. Like being back here is like it's like grayer. It's like, this desaturated and like it's dreamish. It's like this feels like a dream to me almost all the time. And so I can almost feel how matrix it is. And it's funny you say that, because I actually set up this backdrop and this chair specifically to mimic that scene. Where he takes Neo the first time he goes, and he's like, "Welcome to the desert of the real." Like I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I would love if I could put that in videos. So I just set this thing up so I could do that. So it's
No,
just
I
funny you picked
totally
up on
get
that.
it. And yeah, and what I think is interesting, and I don't know how far you have taken the astral, but the other thing that's interesting is when in the astral, it's like, to me, what I find is the most freeing of it is there is no time. So, like, if I was to think of, say, my grandmother who passed away several years ago, I will instantly go and be able to talk with my grandmother as if no time has passed. She's right there, either in the last form that I saw her as or where she's at now, and able to communicate. And so it's almost like there's a version of time traveling without time traveling, because the mind doesn't understand, oh, it's been 20 years since, we've seen this person. They're no longer here. The mind goes, hey, this is who we're thinking of. Boom. There they are.
Instantly. Yeah. Yeah, I've had a few experiences with loved ones that have passed in the astral, and especially with the matter of time. We talked earlier about being pulled out of the body by like myself. I call it the astral echo because I thought it sounded cool.
I
and
like it.
yeah. And to me, it appears as like this being that's like shining or whatnot, and it's like it's glowing. It's like it gives off its own light. It's hard to describe. I'm sure you've seen things like it. And on these trips that it's taken me on, and I say it takes me on trips because it's almost like it's a learning experience. Like it'll be there when I leave my body. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I see it sitting at the end of the bed, and I'm already out of my body. I just have to get up and we start going somewhere. But it's like it's teaching me. So it takes me to different events throughout history. Like seeing like Jesus, for instance, which I thought was interesting. For a long time, I didn't care anything about Jesus. I was like, oh, whatever. And but like going and just seeing certain events, I thought was really interesting, and being able to go back to Egypt and walk around those pyramids at the time of the pharaohs, I thought was like that was a cool thing as well. And it always made me think I must be able to move through time because it doesn't exist here. Time is something time is almost like a law. It's a rule here for this universe. And of course, it's something that we created to keep track of the sequence of events. But outside of this 3D reality, just like you can instantly travel to a location just by thinking about it, like you said, you can instantly travel through time the same way, just because time isn't actually there. Everything is happening all at once. And this is something that I absolutely love talking about because it helps people kind of like turn that part of themselves on and start to have like it's like, oh, wait, like something's actually going on here. Like, this is interesting. This idea that everything is happening right now. When you're in the astral, there is no time. You can travel to the past and to the future because everything exists in this moment right now. There's no difference between the past or the future. It's just happening right now. Everything is happening here. And that kind of led me to the idea of the Akashic records. It's this idea that there is all of human experience and information accessible in one place, and that is here and now. Like going to the Akashic records is like shifting your energy to being able to experience everything. It's almost like widening your gaze away from being one person and being able to take in all the information. it gets really weird. But when you're in the astral, you're only limited by the limitations that you had as a person. Like what you believe you can do here in the 3D reality is your limitation in the astral. If you think you need to fly somewhere, you'll have to. But if you think you can see through everyone's eyes all at once and experience all of life simultaneously, you will. And it's a freaky experience. Like there are no limitations at all. It's totally insane.
All right. And one of the fun things I have, and I say fun is because it drives me nuts, is being on the astral. I'm used to traversing, like we're saying, the second you think about someone, you're already there before you even finish the thought. And I'm like, I'll get like in a position and I'll stop. And I'm like, and I'll look down and I'm like, I'm still here. Oh, that's right. I'm not in the astral. I got to actually go get in the car. And it's like, and there are moments where I forget I can't do what I do in the astral here yet.
Not yet. There's got to be some overlap. This is where people start sounding crazy, but I'm on board for it. There's got to be an overlap. There's definitely a way that you can take the energy and the information there and distill it into something palatable here. Like I've had too many experiences of like tapping into people telepathically and knowing what they're thinking and knowing what's going on with them. Like, oh, someone's in trouble. It's like, man, I just feel strange. Like something's going on. Let me call this person. And of course, they're in the hospital or something happened to them. And so there's always this interesting interplay where you see just how much of a matrix this is because you can kind of mess with it, kind of break the rules of it.
And I have another challenging idea for you. I'm curious your thought of is, like you're saying, going back to the time of Jesus or walking in Egypt and noticing nobody was freaked out by your presence there. I'm wondering is, when that happens, are we appearing as a past life version of ourselves? And so everyone just is like, oh, hey, you're here. Not a big deal. Instead of our future selves appearing and everyone's like, oh my God, who are you? Where did you come from? What are you wearing? Why do you look that way?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to put it. Anytime I've seen the future, it's really weird because I'm not me in that future. Sometimes I'm seeing like an alternate reality version of me where I'll be like, I'll be a white guy or an Indian guy or something like that. I'll have a family, wife and kids and all this. And it was one time I projected and it was like I woke up in my normal, this experience here. And I was like, oh, well, I want to do it. Let's astral project. And so I did. And the experience kind of like came over my eyes. Like I always describe it as like taking a piece of paper and burning the edge and seeing how it like kind of eats it up like that. That's kind of what my vision did. And the next thing you know, I'm in a different bed in a different room and my wife is laying next to me. And I look over and, I see her and she's not my wife that I recognize here. And I see my hands and I'm like Caucasian. It's like, oh, this is interesting. Like, that's not normal. I get up and I walk through the house. Not my house at all. Like everything's different. I have kids and, I'm completely freaked out. And, my wife comes up and is like, are you all right? You seem strange. I was like, no, this isn't right. And the experience ends shortly after that. Like I look at the kids, hug them. It's like, this is strange, and it kind of goes off. And I was much older. That's how I know I was kind of in the future there. I feel like we're entering, like you said, these past lives. When we go back in time, it's possible that in some instances, because sometimes I've gone and it's been like a Ebenezer Scrooge sort of thing. I'm kind of like hovering over things and I'm just looking at things and it's like I'm not interacting with them. They can't see me. Other times it is like I'm interacting. I am a person and I'm being shown something and interacting with people. It's possible. It definitely may be like I'm stepping into a past life version of myself, which is really interesting because it makes you think, are we simultaneously connected to all of those past lives and we can just jump into them? like we said, if everything is happening right now, all those past lives are happening right now. And it's just like watching TV on an old analog TV. All the stations are technically right there. The radio waves are being picked up and everything. Everything is happening right now all around you. And you're just changing the channel so that you can watch it. Perhaps it's like that with consciousness. Perhaps we're only aware of this conversation you and I are having from our viewpoints because we're just on this station. And we could change the station and be in a past life or sometime in the future or a different person entirely. There have been times where I've meditated where I meditate and I blink out. I call it blinking out because I'm not here or me anymore. And I'm somebody else walking down the street. And it's just such a bizarre experience because it's like, this is none of this is real. Like who I am right now in this experience is like, it's not the real thing. It's a thing, but it's not the only real thing. And so it can be really, really interesting. I think there's past life stuff going on. And I also think we're connected to every version of ourselves right now, regardless of time.
It's interesting you say that because I was just about to point out an observation of when you said you went in the future and you appeared differently and you were in a different family, different house, and everything. I was going to say, we as humans feel like this is the only timeline there is. So everything is happening to us either in the past or may be our future. But I've started to theorize and feel like because we are so much more, is there are parallel, we understand now there's parallel Earths, parallel universes. Well, they're being parallel us. Why we could not tap into them if they're us? And so that could be what you did is traverse to another timeline or another dimension by going and saying, oh, now in this dimension, I have white hands and I'm married to this person and have these kids. And this is, the house that I have is somewhat similar, but not similar to mine. And so you saw yourself in an alternate timeline.
Yeah, there's actually a Netflix show about that. I think it's called Sense8. It's this exact idea. It's the idea that I think it's just 8 people and they're all connected to each other. They're able to almost take the knowledge and the abilities from the other 7 people and use them, not, I don't know if simultaneously, but like they'll experience the other person's life and, they'll just kind of blink out. The show starts, I think the first episode, we see one of the 8 characters and she's doing DMT actually, as a group of her friends. And she does it and she wakes up in someone else's body. She's having an experience of someone else. And right when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is the show. This is the show to watch for sure. This is it. And ever since then, I've thought about it. It's so interesting. I've had so many experiences of being someone else. Like I project and I'm living in a different place. I'm either white or Indian, or I'll be like living in Africa or like just totally different stuff. And there's no limit on it. I feel like not just the different versions of you, but anyone. Like there's nothing stopping me from experiencing you and you from experiencing me just like that. It's because we're just filters for what consciousness is. And this may sound extremely unscientific, but I think the unified field is consciousness, this ever pervasive energy, this substance that kind of keeps everything bound together is consciousness. And when you're able to manipulate it, move it, flow with it, you start to see, especially with astral projection, that you can kind of do anything. You're only here experiencing this body because you believe you have to. It's your only option, but it's not.
Right. Yeah, you'll get a kick out of in the circles that I in the metaphysics. We refer to these as our meat suits for living on this planet. It's like They're not us. We're just borrowing them to exist here.
I like that. I like that. I'll use it from here on out. I'm in the meat suit for today. Yeah. Have
And
you? Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, have you ever had that sense, like, say you haven't astral projected in a while, and it's like you just need to get out and like take a break. Like I feel like if I go maybe a week or two without astral projecting or longer, I start to get this like heavy feeling, like my body is really tired and exhausting. And sometimes I think, man, I just need to take a break from this thing. I got to get out of here. Like stretch my legs.
I have. And for me, whenever I call it like astral withdrawal, is I sit there and I'm and I'll try and force myself to go because I'm like you're saying, I feel like I need to go, but if I can't go, I try and force it and it won't happen. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I'll just stop, quiet myself, and then I'll be like, oh, maybe it's because of this. And then I'll go and look at whatever that is. And next thing I know, we're back to astral. It's like, oh, yeah, I had to take care of something here first.
It's interesting. A lot of people, when it comes to meditation, they find that they can never quiet their minds, but they've got this like running to-do list of all the things that they could take care of that are just kind of like nagging at the back of their heads. Take care of it. I find that helps, quieting the mind. I'm curious to know, what's your progress? What's your process when you're like, say you sit down, like, all right, let's astral project today. My process is different, I guess, than other people's, but I'm curious to hear what yours is.
Well, for me, actually, it is progress, is because it happened in stages. Is for me, the first thing was I have memory of, and this is going to sound a little quirky, but I would be in my room, hovering above myself, look up. Next thing I know, I'm on the ship of Ra and we're floating in the heavens. And so I'm like, oh, so I can leave the earth. Cool. Okay. And they're like, okay, now you got to go over here. And then I would go over to a place near the moon or Mars, kind of in between there. And there would be like these little pads, and you would stand on the pad, think about where you wanted to go, and then it would be like a shot. You would be shot there, and it would instantly kind of teleport or just speed you up enough to get there. And I noticed as I became more comfortable being out of body and understanding the science of the astral, how it works, I would skip the ship of Ra, go straight to the jump point, is what I dubbed it as. And then I would just be like, okay, I don't even need the jump point now. I just will think about this world and be like, okay, here we go. And one day, I don't know if you've gotten to this level yet, but I was sitting there and I was like, I'm traveling so far out and my consciousness is like struggling a little bit with it and I'm feeling worn, that kind of like tired feeling. And you're like, I'm energy. I can't be tired. Something's going on. Well, I figured out what it is the mind can't process and keep up. So your body is getting exhausted, even though it's resting, because it's still operating under the guise of you're moving around. It's moving around. It's feeling everything you're going through. And so I was like, I need to recharge and regenerate myself before I return. So I created a place where I go and energy is infused in. And like if my arm is hurting, it'll be like it's almost like that scene Tron Evolution where he takes the broken DNA out of her arm sequence and put a new one in, and her arm regenerates. That's kind of what it is for me. And then I'll return to the body, and the body's like, "Oh, hey, we're not tired anymore. We're all good.
All right. Oh, everything's fine now. Now that you're back.
Wake up, we're good to go."
Yeah.
I don't wake up like, man, I feel like I traversed like 7 galaxies. Man.
Well rested. I've had similar experiences. I used to hang out or interact with a group of people. I think it was 4 or 5 of us. I don't remember. But we were in a Discord call, and we had found each other through YouTube. And some of them were energy healers, and another one was like a psychic that like gave people readings, but they were all good at astral projecting. And so we got the group together, and they invited me to the group, and they had this place that they would go in the astral, and it was like a planet, but it was like an island specifically on this planet that they went to every time, and we would meet there at this place, and we would like practice our intuition abilities and things like this, and like guessing things about each other to see if we knew them, all in the astral, which is really interesting. And the first time I went there, uh, I wanted to test myself, and they wanted to test me to see if I was, what I was actually doing. And one of the people in the group drew up a map of the place that they were in, and he kind of like just a basic map drawing, and he's a good artist, so it looked great. And I was like, oh, that's cool. After the fact, I hadn't seen that map going to this place astrally, and when I got there, I basically just charted out what the place looked like. I spent time on a beach there, and I had gone back into like a forest. There was a mountain range area, and I basically just charted out all these places for them. And they're like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly how it is on the map. And they sent me a picture of the map, and I was like, yeah, those are the 2 boulders I saw over there, and there's that. It's like, wow, this is it. And so that's really interesting how there's like this interconnection between those things. And astral sanctuaries is something that comes to mind. I've gone into the astral, and I've made a specific place for myself, like you described. I make that place to do rituals out of, to do manifestation and call certain spirits to interact with me in that place. I feel like there's more energy there, and it kind of helps the connection. And so, yeah, it's really cool. Definitely, it's really cool that you bring that up. I don't talk to too many people about making places in the astral. Yeah, it's very cool. And the jump
And
pads. The jump pads.
well,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, you finish your thought.
I was just gonna say the jump pads are like they're like portals. I go like there'll be these certain spots. You said you're on like a ship of Ra. There's some on the earth that I go to. These specific spots. One is in like a desert. Others are in caves. I go to these spots, and for me, they're like it's a certain area where it's almost like you have to charge it with energy. Then a portal appears, and you shoot through the portal, which is really interesting. I don't know why it has to be that way. You don't ever have to use them, but in the beginning, I did. It was really interesting.
Yeah. I think it has to do with getting your mind to process what it's seen, and it gives it a field of reference, or not field of reference, frame of reference.
Mhm.
Because I found if I could relate it to something in this world, that my mind would go, oh yeah, that's why we did that. Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, yeah, that's why we do this. Whereas if I couldn't relate it to something, my mind keeps going, why are we doing this? I don't think this is right. Are we doing this right? Are we doing it wrong? What? And it just starts into the questioning mode. And so that could be why you're experiencing it that way. And what I was going to ask is, when you're astral and learning to create, like you were saying, created a place for yourself, I actually found one day, I was like, I wonder if, how you get in those modes. And I created this world out there, and it has a little floating island, which was interesting that you guys said you went to an island on this
What's
world.
going
And
on?
so I created this and I left the people there, and there's people there, I left it populated, and I introduced myself to them and I said, I'm here to, watch over this world for you, but I want to be clear. I'm not your God. I'm not a God. Don't pray to me. Don't worship me. I'm no different than you all are. But if you need help, just call and I'll come and help. And there have been times where something happened nearby, I guess, or something, and the island would start to go lower. And so I would come back out, they'd call me, I'd come and I'd be like, well, this is interesting. So I'd tweak it a little and be like, okay, let's put the island back up where it's supposed to be. The water's flowing nicely. Okay, that's good. Everything's good. Okay. And then I'd stop in and be like, okay, guys, everything's good. You don't have to worry anymore. Go about your daily lives and have fun. But I also, though, do put something over the world so that only I can find it. Because it's like, I don't want somebody else coming in and being like, oh, yeah, I'm your God and worse, and get into this
Oh
ego
yes.
trip and be like, and then I have to undo all of that because it's like, I want it to be free of like the earthly condition, the ego condition. And so it's like I'll shield it from that. And I'm curious if you or any of your students ever tried to create something like that, be like, hey, can we create a world? Can we create, a universe, or can we create a star?
It's actually one of the more advanced things. Usually, when I've had like a few students get really advanced, where they start to project and they can do it consciously just from meditation. And I'm like, okay, we're at that point now where we can start creating thought forms and start kind of sending them out and doing things and sending out doubles of ourselves. Like at any given moment, there are some days where I send out copies of myself, like astral copies of myself, which is an interesting experience in and of itself. But there have been times where I'll tell a student, I want you to make a temple first. Like make a temple for yourself, something like that. And they'll come back and tell me after they've made that temple, when they go back and revisit it, there are people there. Like it's inhabited like by living people, and they have conversations with them. And one of them was like, yeah, I went back and there were people there and they were just like worshiping at the temple, like it was a normal place. And I interacted with them and I asked them like, what are you guys doing here? Where'd you guys come from? It's like, oh, this has always been here. Like we're just here and we're worshiping. Like, I always thought that was really strange. And in the past, when I've created a place, I haven't had to make people or like bring about these entities, bring them with energy, bring them to life. They've just been there. They've just appeared as though they were there all along. And I think that's kind of like the time difference and time not being a thing. Like you make a place in the astral and it's almost as though you can see instantly what it will become, where people will be and how it grows. I think it's interesting that you go back and interact with them and it's like, oh, hey, let me help you guys out with stuff. I haven't got to the point of going back and interacting with them and changing things, but the places that I've been to, I go back and I visit from time to time and just experience what it's like living with these people. It's very interesting. It lets you see just how like honeycombed this whole experience is.
And I don't think I created them either. I think they just appeared, and and using frame, of movies is how my mind correlates it. And I don't know if you saw Tron Evolution, but Korra's race being that they were not programs, but they weren't users. They were something that just arrived, is the story
Mm.
in the world. They were like, and they could heal in ways that everybody else couldn't. And he's like, I need to bring you into our world because you are the key we need to evolve. And he's like, I got to figure this out while at the same time battling my alter self of my old perceptions. And that's kind of what I started to realize why they called it Tron Evolution. It isn't because the world evolved, it's because he evolved, and the version of himself that was taking care of the world was limited by his old perception. And they mention that in the movie when he goes and says to himself, you were perfect, you are perfect,
Mm.
but I realized I'm not perfect, I made mistakes, you could never learn beyond what I knew. So that's where the flaw was. And it's like this big moment of realization, and they merge together and change, it alters and opens the doorway. But yeah, and so I'm kind of wondering, are there beings in the astral that are always there, and when we create stuff, maybe we're not truly creating, we're just shining a light on something, and everyone's like, hey, they found us.
That's a good. Hey, we're here. That's a really interesting way of putting it. Is creating in the astral is a discovery. That's how it feels. At least when I want to make something, it's like the image of what I want to make comes to my mind. I don't like draw out the plans and make a blueprint for anything. It's just like, oh, I want to make something, and I'll see a temple come to mind, and I'll focus on that temple. I'll bring up the energy in me, and it'll start to materialize. But it's possible there is like a light that you're shining on it, and it's just you're seeing something that's already been there. It makes me think of like the void, this infinite void of potentiality. When you're astral projecting, you're kind of in that void. You're in a space of it. You can go deeper and deeper into the void, but when you leave the body, you're in this place where I guess when you shine a light, you start to see things that are there. That's really interesting. So there were people already there. Like I make a place, or like a student makes a temple, and like they're experiencing the things that have always been there. We just have been. We've always been.
Yeah, which, I mean, in a way, you could sit there and go, well, if it's always been there, and the fact that time as we know it doesn't exist there, did we truly create this? And that's why to them it's always been there, is because we created it in their past, even though it's our current,
Yeah, that's
because the time is in such a loop that
yeah.
everything's happening in one singularity moment. And so, yeah, it really begs the question of, which time is the right time? The present, the past, the future, or are all of them correct? And that's what the astral is trying to show us.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Maybe they're all correct. Yeah, definitely. And I think they have to all be correct. People have theorized that the purpose of existence itself is just for the universe to experience itself, which is an interesting way of putting it. I think Alan Watts says that we're the aperture through which the universe perceives itself. And so, in order for life or the universe to fully experience itself, every perspective would have to be true in that moment. Past, present, and future would have to just be the same experience.
Right. We're actually a minute over the hour. I just noticed
Oh,
that.
well, we were we were riffing. Time flies.
It does. And if you have time for a couple more questions, or if you need to go, we can cut it.
No. I got a minute. Not when we get into the good stuff. I don't want to leave now. What do you got, man? What do you got?
Well, one question I have for you and I don't know if it's tied to the astral projection or not, is you mentioned in your bio holotropic breathing. I have never heard the term holotropic breathing. And so I'm curious, what exactly is that? And is that something that came about with the astral adventure that you had, or was something else that triggered that?
That's something that my mentor introduced me to a long time ago. I was like maybe 19 or 20 at the time, but uh, it was just this, and I think other people do it as well. You could call it like pranayama or what's his name, Wim Hof, I believe. Wim Hof does a type of breathing technique. Holotropic breathing, I think, is just you could say it's an umbrella term for breathing techniques like nidras or kundalini breaths, and the breath of fire, things like that. I like to see it as just manipulations of your energy body through the breath, and that's what I view that as. And I teach people how to activate their energy bodies, how to feel their energy for the first time through the use of something as simple as breath. Breath is a tool that we all have. I mean, if we're alive and in good standing, we all have plenty of breath to work with. But when you start to flow with your breath and really put your focus and your awareness into the breath, you start to notice these tinglings, these chills, these vibrations of energy moving through you naturally. And it's not that you're becoming it's not that you're activating your energy. It's more that you're becoming aware of what's already happening around you. Take psychic abilities, for instance. All that is just getting better at picking up the signals that are happening all the time. Like you're picking up higher dimensional information and you're interpreting it with your five senses so that you can make sense of it. Just like you were saying earlier, it's your mind trying to make sense of what you're seeing. So it has to make a reference frame for you so that you can figure it out. So when someone says like, oh, I'm getting an image of like a beach, or I'm getting an image of like a golden flower, they're getting higher dimensional information and their mind is processing it in such a way that they can get something meaningful from it. It can be interpreted in many different ways because, as you're probably aware, these things in the astral, they shift and they can change and they can take different forms. And so I could look at one thing and say, oh, I'm experiencing something like this. And you can say, I'm experiencing something like that. And ultimately, we're talking about like a prism that's reflecting light in different ways. And so we're just seeing different sides of the same thing. But your question about holotropic breathing, I tend to go down rabbit holes. But yeah, I think it's just breath work. It's just the many different types of breath work. I'm really big on breath work, again, because everybody can do it. And it's so powerful. There's so many benefits you can get from it.
So I'm curious with, as you're saying, focusing on breath work and breathing, and, we laugh that we say it's a natural thing that we're always doing as long as we're alive. But I find there are times when I'm awake or, focusing on doing things, and all of a sudden I'll be like, and it hurts a little bit. And it's like I realized I haven't been breathing for a while. What do you think causes the subconscious or conscious mind or the body to all of a suddenly stop the breathing process and then be like, oh, wait, we're supposed to be breathing,
What's going
and
on?
start it up real quick and be like,
Yeah, oh,
oh,
wait. I've had that happen several times before, particularly in meditation. You can see a lot of this in Zen Buddhism and these different types of meditation traditions, where you'll have an experience and you'll leave your body and you'll go through space and you'll become one with God and you'll have this like non-dual conscious experience, this non-localized conscious experience. And when you get back, you're, oh, your skin is tingling like, like you haven't been breathing that whole time. Who knows how long you were gone and how long you weren't breathing. But I think it's even been shown scientifically is that when you get really deep into meditation, this is like, theta brainwave state, this theta activity in the brain, you get really deep into meditation, your heart rate slows and your breathing slows. to the point where when you're starting to have these really expansive, sort of expanding consciousness experiences, you stop breathing a lot of the times. You breathe very shallow or hardly at all. I don't know why it happens, but that seems to be characteristic of really focusing intently on an experience. So say you're doing the dishes or doing some household chore or something like that, and you're like, "Oh man, I haven't been breathing." You're focused intently on this thing, and it's like you almost become it. So it's I don't know. It's really interesting.
It is, and I wish there was a way to start the process up without throwing the body in shock and being like, kind of hurts a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know these meat suits. I tell you.
Yeah, it's like whoever created them. It's like I love how I have a running joke about when you go into medical science and they're like, well, the body doesn't need two of these, you can survive on one. And I'm like, I'm sure whoever designed these suits for us did not sit there and go, eh, you know, one of these works, but I got another one over here I made. Might as well throw it in there and
Yeah,
give them
whatever.
two.
Yeah, why not have two of them take it? Yeah, that's interesting. Everything has a reason.
Yeah.
Mm, everything has a reason.
So I'm curious too to see, with your expanding awareness of astral and everything, have you ever tried going off world and going and visiting other races and being like, hey, making like what we would call first contact and,
Mm.
saying, being like, yes, there is life out there or
A lot of times when I do that, they're waiting for me. These different beings that I visit, and they know what's going on, and they're hip to it. They're like, "Oh, hey, what's going on, man? Like, check out the burrito bar. Like just hang out for a while." And it's like they know what's going on, and it's like their society operates around this level of conscious awareness. And I've had the experience of even becoming them and like kind of melding consciousness with certain beings. A lot of the times I'll be in meditation and I do a lot of work with spirits. I do a lot of work with like Islamic magic, and because that's the tradition I was brought up with. That's what I was taught. And a lot of times these beings, these like they're usually green, usually white, these beings will show up and they'll again take me out of my body and lead me to these certain experiences, and I'll meet different people, different entities. I call them people. Sometimes they look like people, other times they're just an energy. These beings that have kind of like, I guess the idea is that they've moved beyond physical experience and they're all existing like on this higher plane. And so I think that's really cool. As far as aliens go, I've always thought they were an extra dimensional phenomena, something like that, because like they have to be able to be here and be somewhere else very quickly and interact with this world in ways that supersede what we can do here. And if you think about the fourth dimension, really any of them that we have experienced, first, second, third, and fourth, if you want to look at it like that, the second dimension you could say has a shadow in the first dimension, and the third has a shadow in the second. Because a shadow is two dimensional, and in a two dimensional world, the dot would be the shadow. Stuff like that. I think what we're experiencing with aliens and these other beings is this fourth dimensional object, this fourth dimensional experience is casting a shadow in this reality, and it looks like these strange experiences we have. But when you go into the astral, it looks perfectly normal. It's like, oh, that's normal. What's going on? They're just seeing through everything and teleporting places. That's just how it works here. But for us in this place, it's like, oh, that's weird. That shouldn't be happening. They shouldn't be able to just pop in and disappear. So I think it definitely has to do with the astral and how far you can go with that.
which brings up my next question. And I mean, this one is totally theoretical. Even I don't have an answer really for it, but it's something I've started to theorize is like you're saying, the alien races or star beings, whatever you want to call them. operating at 4D, say 5D, and that's where we're heading to. Could it be that they created the astral plane as kind of like a learning school so that when we reach 4 and 5D, we can better operate within it and we're not going to be like the 2-year-old in college going, wait a minute, can you go back and define how I got here?
Mm.
It'd be like everyone's like, dude, you're asking like first grade stuff. This is college. What are you doing? So I wonder, is the astral world kind of like our dimensional school?
Have you, and I'm going to ask you a question because that's always fun. Have you ever been to the schools in the astral?
I don't know that I ever have visited schools. I've visited worlds, I've visited races, and I've visited places, but I don't know that I've actually ever stepped foot in a school. Maybe I have.
Next time you go, just intend to go to the school and you'll be there. I've, when I project, I'll like just appear and I'll be in like a auditorium and there'll be someone in the front talking about how to navigate this sort of space and how to create things and whatever, how life works in this place. And I'll be confused, like, what's going on here? How are we here? And it looks like all people just projected here and all this sort of stuff. I think the astral is a place where beings live, like fourth, fifth dimension, whatever. But I think our ability to astral project kind of works like the training wheels for getting us used to being in that place and transitioning over entirely. I've had a lot of experiences in like the astral schools, and a lot of other people I've talked to, they've been like, yeah, I was in a school, like I was learning whatever, and I forgot it when I woke up, but like I was definitely learning something. I definitely think we're here to learn. This human experience, as Dolores Cannon has put it, like we're here to learn how to manipulate and control energy. And I totally believe that because when you get into the higher realms, all it is energy, manipulating and controlling energy. So I think we're doing this life thing so that we can figure out how to navigate that space. And for people like us who astral project frequently and who kind of know what that is, we're just, I don't want to say progressing faster because that kind of sounds mean, but we have a leg up on learning the subject.
Well, the term that I've kind of stumbled on, and I think it was either my mom or somebody else gave me on another organization I'm a part of, is way shower. And they're like, because what you do is you're not really a healer, you're not really a student, you're not really a teacher. You're more like someone who's showing people what's possible out there. And so I was like, I like that definition, because it encompasses more things. And so it's kind of like you're saying, with your students and you is, you're like becoming way showers
Hmm.
for the next generation of the people who are going to be rising up and going, where am I? And we're going to be like, oh, yeah, I've been where you're going to be. So here, let me help you out. And, let's take you, like you're saying, go to this school, go to this class,
Yeah,
start
take this
here.
class.
This will help you out. And, it'll be more of a smooth transition where our generation, and when I say our generation, I'm meaning those who naturally or are astral projecting now.
Hmm.
We didn't have, like you had, mentors to say do this or do that. We learned it on our own. And
Yeah, took
so
time.
we're like, yeah, it's like we were there to learn so that, yeah, the next group that comes through, we're like, don't freak out.
Yeah, it can go
This is
farther.
natural what you're going through. We've been there. We've done that. It's
Yeah, chill out. It's all right. You'll get through it. Yeah,
like, you like
definitely.
what I'm doing because stick with it. You will do what
Mm,
I'm doing. Or, kind of like, bringing peace and serenity to the chaotic energy of first stepping foot. And
yeah.
I meant to ask, when you were looking at your body for the first time on the bed, and you were saying you looked closely at the face, it was like, yeah, this is me. I'm wondering if your experience was kind of a little bit like musicians when they hear their songs playing on the radio for the first time, that euphoric feeling of, oh my God, it's
Ah, that's
I'm
me.
seeing this and there
Mm.
I am, but here I am. And that euphoric state that kind of severs the mind of going, I'm either here or I'm there. Now, all of a suddenly, because of that euphoric state, it's like, I can be both.
Yeah, yeah. Experience is the greatest teacher. That's Gnosticism. This idea that you can learn something with head knowledge, but until you experience it, you don't really know it. And in that moment, being there is like, oh yeah, okay, this makes sense. You can take it a step further, and I'm sure you have this as you start to get more and more familiar with and remember what you can do, because it's almost like learning how to do this stuff is like remembering. It's like because you've just forgotten what you could do. When you start to interact with your physical body when you're out of body, there's this interesting energy interplay that happens where you can heal yourself. And then there's interacting with other people's astral bodies and interacting with doubles that you've created and starting to astral project and move into someone's body and experience what they're doing. It just gets so wild. There's so many things you can do with it. And then you start to realize that when you segment what you can do, you're just creating another limitation. And then you move away from ego entirely. Then it's just like you astral project and you're like, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And you allow the experience to do whatever it wants because that's you doing it. The energy that we were talking about, it's not some foreign thing. It's you. It's just you separated from this egoic identity. It's just pure essence. And the more you start to allow that, it starts to take you and you start to have these experiences spontaneously. My goal is to get people to having spontaneous experience, like, and have it be a normal thing. And it takes understanding that this person that you are is just a filter for everything else that you are. In the Bible, Moses asks, like, God, who are you when he first meets him? And God says, I am that I am. If you think about it, it's like, I am. Like, well, what's that? Oh, I am. I'm that. I am all things. I'm everything. And, people try to twist it and turn it into something else. It's like you take it at face value. But God is everything. You can tap into God with anything. Whether you're knitting or doing dishes, you can have an enlightening experience.
That's true. And I'm kind of curious, as you're talking about like creating doubles and everything on astral. If you've ever had a double take on physical form, in which case is that kind of similar to what some people are starting to call the term bilocating, where you're in two places at the same time?
I have not personally manifested a double. My mentor has, and that's really weird. A lot of weird things. A lot of weird things like teleportation, bilocation. A lot of weird things can happen as you start to solidify your energy. Like the more and more you develop it, the more you can control the mind and what you can do. And I believe the process, if I remember right, you go through what you have to make the double, however you do it, however you have to. Once you have a double of yourself in the astral, a version of you there in the astral, you have to identify with it and almost become it yourself. You have to take ownership of it and be it. And when that is full and solidified enough, it's almost like you've made two separate brains. And I've gotten to the point where once you do that, you start to see through both perspectives and you start to feel through both bodies. And it's like, okay, I am both of these things. And it gets super weird. There's this really weird interference that happens in the brain where it's like, oh, I'm experiencing two different things at once. It doesn't make any sense. And I think after you get past that point, then you get to the point of solidifying the body and making it real here. But that's like really advanced manifestation work. But it's possible. Gurus in the past, yogis have done it. I think first time I heard about it, I read it in Autobiography of a Yogi, this bilocation sort of thing, like appearing in multiple places at once. So it's possible people have experienced it.
Very cool. And so we're getting close to an hour and a half. And so
Oh yeah. I should.
um,
I've got people waiting on me.
well, I was going to say, we're in a good spot to like go, hey, this is a good part one. We can continue with the part two if you'd like and have you back on and,
Sure,
continue this.
of course. I love talking about this stuff. It's a good time, and there's energy that's passed on, even for the people listening. Just being here and listening to it, like the Upanishads, it's just something you're eavesdropping on. This is a story you're hearing, but there's energy, there's power in the story, there's power in the testimony of what happened. So just hearing about it's enough to help people have a breakthrough.
Yes, it's like I like to coin it as we're planting a seed, and when they're ready, to let it grow, or if they're never going to be ready, the seed's there waiting, and that's okay. Both are in perfect divine right order, and what they do with it is up to them. I am free and clear of what they do with it. You're free and clear of what they
It's
do with
up to
it.
you. Yeah, you get the
Yeah.
information, you do whatever you want with it.
So that's what I love about the shows. And so thank you for coming on and thank you for being
It was a
patient.
pleasure.
And I'm so grateful we got this episode.
Hey, divine timing. It happened when it was supposed to happen. No big deal.
Right. And if you want to reach Cal, if you have any questions, his link tree is in the description. Do you have a preferred method that you'd like them to use in the link tree, or
Uh,
any of those work?
I think in the link tree, usually people want to work with me. I still have openings for my mentorship that I do now. And basically, I teach you everything that I've learned. Take you through activating your energy, developing your psychic abilities, learning to astral project and control it, and astral project at will, and how to work with spirits and really just be a weirdo at the end of the day. Uh, for that link is in the link tree. I think it's just called mentorship. It's just simple. You can go to that. I've got a link for the website astralmindfoundation.com, and it talks about my experiences. I've got articles and blogs on there, and YouTube. You can find me on YouTube. I've got like 180 something videos on YouTube. Talks about this stuff, teaches how to do it. So I'm out there.
And if I'm not mistaken, because I have a lot of guests and I it's been a while since I've looked at the thumbnail, I'll be honest, is you have a book too, don't you?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I always forget to talk about the book. It's been sitting right here next to me. Yeah, connecting the current. I recently changed the name of it. I had a vision of the book with a different name, so I just changed the name of it. I mean, you can do that stuff pretty easy in Amazon. You just like switch up the name of something. But yeah, this book, you can find it. The link is on the link tree as well. I think the link is just book, so it's easy to find. And yeah, this book is for complete beginners, for intermediate, advanced people. It takes you from A to B, A to Z, excuse me. Like it takes you from freeing your mind, understanding that you're more than just this body, and it gives you practical steps, meditations, techniques to broadening and expanding your consciousness. And it's the culmination of 10 years of my experiences. I talk about a whole bunch of experiences in that book that we haven't talked about here. Maybe in part two, we'll talk about some of those. But yeah, it's a fun time. A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, and I have to say I did notice your little Morpheus moment there. The free your mind comment. That
Oh,
was like Morpheus'
it
favorite.
happens. It happens by itself now. It's really funny that you pick up on that because I had this idea to take my YouTube videos in the direction of like you're having a conversation with Morpheus. And so that's why I have this like backdrop and I have this chair in my garage. It's just bring this chair out here. I woke up and I was like, man, that'd be a really cool idea. I'd love to try that. Just because it'd be cool. Like, I wore a suit, put glasses on too. It was really funny. And but like I was getting really good information coming through. And I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is it. Hopefully people like it. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say you're becoming your own Morpheus. You're
indeed.
becoming, I guess, in a way, the role you were meant to be.
Hmm. Interesting. Becoming who you were always meant to be. Isn't that what the whole game is about?
It is. And I was laughingly gonna say, don't spend your time looking for Neo.
No. It's funny
he'll,
because
he'll show up when he's ready.
yeah, I have to watch The Matrix now because you've done this. I have to watch it now. Oh man, but man, this was a blast. Thank you.
It was. Thank you. And so thank you to everyone who's watching, everyone who will be watching, wherever you are in the world. Make it a blessed day, afternoon, evening. And if you're asleep, do feel free to, astral yourself into the episode and catch what you missed. And if you can't do that, wake up and watch it. So then the next time you're asleep, you can do that. Wouldn't that be interesting? Start having astral guests watching our shows.
Oh, that would be. you're, you're living in the future now. Oh man.
So, real quick, my one last true question of the guests that I love to get their view on is, from your experiences, doesn't have to be over what we were talking about, it can be anywhere in your life. What is a golden nugget that you would love to leave the audience with?
Hmm. Hmm. It's usually something that I say in just about every podcast that I do. You have to start for anyone starting their spiritual journey, anyone like who's kind of dropped off the path and want to restart it. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. And when you start this journey, this spiritual journey, you have to start from the finish line. You have to know that everything you're ever going to obtain or achieve or reach, you already have in you right now in this moment. You're just going down the road so that you can have the experience and enjoy it. But you can have fulfillment, happiness, wholeness, completeness. You can have it right here in this moment because everything exists right here. You are the version that you are going to become right now. You're already perfect. When you live from that, then everything becomes a joy. Then everything becomes easy. And it's not, am I going to make it? It's, I get to make it. I get to have this experience. That's what I'd leave them with.
Wow, I'm like speechless. I'm trying to wrap my mind around everything you just laid out and being like, how can I summarize this and use it as tag into what I say? And I'm like, nope, not going to happen. So, what I'll do instead is I will piggyback on what Cal said and just say, wake up and take each day with filled with love and joy, and perhaps find a mantra that works for you. One that works for me is, I wake up, go through the day, do what I feel is right, and at the end of the night, if I go to sleep feeling like I did everything to my best and everything worked out divinely, then I've had a great, perfect day. No matter what happened in between, as long as I can wake up and end in that manner, it's a perfect day.
Well said. Well said.
So, with that, I'm going to say goodnight to everyone. Thank you again to Cal, and we will be in touch for part 2 because this was just such exciting and interesting conversation around the astral. That was a lot of fun, and I've learned some stuff too. So there you go.
Definitely. It's been a blast.
And hopefully it won't be, next October. We'll get you back sooner.
Let's hope. Hey, but if that's how it shakes out, no big deal.
Exactly. We'll bring you back when it's the right time that works for both of us. All right. Good night, everyone.